All right, everybody, good afternoon and welcome to our Virtual EDGY workshop. My name is Cameron Glasgow. I am the Director of Marketing as well as the EDGY Conference Chairperson for Penny Lane Centers. Just want to say how great it is to see so many people joining us today to learn, to embrace, to talk, and just have a wonderful forum that we're all going to walk away feeling empowered and ready to work with LGBTQ youth and families that we all serve. We know that this last year has been a very, very challenging year and a half, 2 years. It feels like we've just lost a lot of time there, and we're just really happy to be able to see people virtually. We normally like to hold our EDGY conference in person. For the last 11 years, we've been doing it in person, and we really feel that having an in-person conference and having resources there and a resource fair, and it just really brings that connection that we all so yearn for. And it really lets you to have those difficult conversations and walk away with a lot of takeaways to better serve LGBTQ youth and accept them and love them and bring them into the fold in the way that they should, so they can live their thriving selves. But unfortunately, this year has been a challenging year for everyone, and we've had to, be able to bend and pivot when we need to. And we were hoping to hold the conference on November 3rd in person, but due to the Delta variant, we had to push that back. But fortunately, we are here virtually, and we're going to be doing the in-person conference on May 12th, May 18th of 2022. We hope that you all will be able to join. I'll be talking a little bit more about that, later on as we finish up all the wonderful presentations. But, I know that everyone's time is valuable, and so I wanted to sort of get into today's workshop. Today, we're labeling our workshop Intersecting Identities. What we're going to be exploring is the intersectionality of race and gender and, the impact that it has on our LGBTQI community. We also address being Black and gay in America, as well as our allyship for the LGBTQI, sorry, that's a mouthful there, plus BIPOC community. Presenters will also reflect on personal experiences from within the LGBTQI community. And then what we're going to do with this event, we really want to just take a deeper dive into the historical context of being Black and gay, as well as the criminalization of Black lesbians in our society. How can we encourage others to take the steps to become an ally and support one another that we can offer to advance each other's understanding of the LGBTQI community. So what we're excited to have is a couple of presenters from Penny Lane Centers here. We're also going to have, a couple of different people from our community partners, like the Hillsides organization, from the Department of Children and Family Services, and all of you that are joining us here. We're just so happy and welcome to have everyone here. And regardless of your role, through EDGY, we will be able to grow and learn from one another. And that's what we hope you're able to take away from. We really want to just make this a community. And the biggest thing we want to do after we have these wonderful presentations from all of our different presenters, we really want to hear from you. Where we learn and where we grow is when we have these communications and have these conversations that we can ask questions that maybe we weren't able to ask before. Maybe you hear something from these presentations today and you're like, I want to tie into that a little bit more. Can we talk about this? Can we find out more information there? So that's what's real important, I think, for us to have today, is to hear from each one of you and to hear what you want to do, what kind of questions you have for our presenters. So without further ado, I'm going to just run through all the different presenters we have today, and then we're going to start off with our first presentation. What we ask after we finish up all the each person's presentation, that you hold off your questions till the very end. So maybe write those questions down there. You can put them into our chat, and then once we're in there in the chat, we can look at them and we can address them later on as a team. But right now, we're just going to go through each presentation first, and then we'll come back to that Q&A at the end, and we'll hear from you all. So to start off with our presenters here, we first have Judy Grant. Judy Grant is one of our Penny Lane family members. She is the Director of Equity and Inclusion at Penny Lane Centers. In addition to that, we also have another Penny Lane family member, Summer Gomez. Summer is a clinical supervisor at Penny Lane Centers, and she's also the project coordinator for our Embracing Identities program. In addition to that, we also have a wonderful presenter, Mario Johnson from Mario Johnson from the Department of Children and Family Services, the Office of Equity there. He is a division chief. He'll be presenting to us as well. And in addition to that, we also have Christopher Harriott. He's one of our former Penny Lane therapists who now has his own practice called the Healing Chariot. In addition to that, we also have Cadence King. Cadence is one of our former Penny Lane clients, as well as works with several different organizations, the Trans Wellness Center, the Trans Women's Center, in addition to a bunch of other organizations. She helps out continually. She's been with Penny Lane before, and she's always there to help us out. So I'd just like to welcome all of our presenters here. Everyone give a big quick round of applause for everyone there. They're going to present some wonderful, wonderful topics today that are going to make your mind feel blown. So I'm going to turn it over to Judy Grant to start off our presentations here. Judy Grant is one of our Penny Lane presenters here. Judy, welcome.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Cameron. And thank you, everybody, for being here. It's truly a pleasure to join all of you today in this conversation that we're going to be having about intersecting identities. My name is Judy Grant, as Cameron mentioned, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. Before I really get started, I want to introduce you to a couple of friends by the name of Daniel and Emily. David, can you please have Daniel and Emily join us?
One second here, we might be having some technical difficulty. 1 second here.
No problem. Thank you. They'll wait for us. They're eager to be here.
There's a little bit of an issue I'm finding out from on our end with the YouTube link there. We're going to be working on that real quickly. Judy, just want to maybe just talk a little bit about, before we get into what this link is here, just sort of give us a little preface there, and then we'll lead into the video. I appreciate everyone's patience here.
Okay, no problem. So Daniel and Emily are two friends that I'm going to have you meet. And they really talk about the challenges of being in the LGBTQ community, but also Daniel really talks about the challenges of being Black and gay, and the challenges faced within the gay community, as well as within the Black community, and his lack of feeling accepted in both of those arenas. And it really kind of sets the stage for what we're going to be discussing today. Definitely tease me up for what I'm going to be sharing with you. And I hope David can find it so we can get that started for you. So just bear with us a few more moments, please. Here we go.
Hi, Daniel. How's it going?
Hey, Emily. It's going okay. What about you?
Same here. Can you believe everything that's happening in the world right now?
Yeah, times are definitely changing. I'm happy the conversation's happening, though.
I agree. I understand it's a hard talk to have, and sometimes it's a little scary to bring up race in the workplace, or even at the dinner table.
Right. In the past few weeks, I've been a part of so many wonderful discussions with my coworkers and those around me, but it did feel a little uncomfortable at first, even as a Black person.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, I can't begin to imagine what life has been like for you. Being an out gay man in America already poses so many unnecessary threats, but this conversation about race really opened my eyes to the other factor of being Black in America.
Well, as a Black man, I face this dilemma every day of my life. When I'm with others in the LGBTQ community, some gay white men may see me as inferior. It sometimes feels as though, even within that subset community, I fall into the minority. On the other hand, when I'm with others in the Black community, I've at times been made to feel ostracized, like I don't belong, or that I'm not welcomed in that community either. Some straight Black men look at me and only see a gay man. I've often felt as though I'm looked at as less than in both minority communities. I know I'm not alone. Almost all of my gay Black friends have experienced this on some level. It's an isolating feeling, and it's been very hard to overcome. But this, unfortunately, is a trend that goes back decades for Black gay men. The Black Lives Matter movement is doing so much to bring these conversations of race and injustice to the forefront, which allows us to shed more light on the Black gay community and the injustices we face from every angle. These conversations are becoming more common in all communities, and I have so much hope for the future.
Daniel, I am so happy to hear that. I agree. We have so much more to learn about one another, and I want to be sure that I keep these conversations going, not only in my personal life, but also at work. We must acknowledge that our experiences are never going to be the same. My life as a lesbian white woman will never compare to your experiences as a gay Black man, but I want to stand up for you and be part of the change.
Absolutely, and thank you, Emily. The best thing that you or anyone can do right now is to continue the conversation. Notice injustice, call it out, and always stand up for those around you. This needs to be ongoing, and we should stop worrying so much about bringing up these topics and truly seek to look after and love one another. Real change always starts with one person wanting to make a difference.
Thank you, David. So I'm happy to say that it's more than one person because I believe we have hundreds of people here today ready to stand up and make a difference. So I want you to just kind of stick a pin in the video for a minute, and I'm going to start with something else. So just to get us all on the same page, I'm going to start with a series of statements and questions. And if you would like to, grab a piece of paper and a pen and just make some tally marks if any of these statements and questions refer to you in any way. I'm going to briefly pause after each just to give you a moment to reflect. So here we go. If you almost always see members of your race, sexual orientation, religion, and class widely represented on television, in the newspaper, and the media in a positive manner. If you are a man and sit with your legs crossed. If you almost always feel comfortable with people knowing your sexual orientation. If you feel certain that you will not be followed, harassed, or watched under close supervision. If you are a woman and have ever worn a baseball cap. If you have been the subject of surveillance while shopping. If you are a woman and shop in the men's section in stores. If you have ever been the only person of your race or ethnicity in a classroom or place of work. If you identify as a feminist. If you have ever been called names regarding your race, socioeconomic status, gender, sexual orientation, or physical or learning disability, and were made to feel uncomfortable as a result. If you have been mistreated or served less fairly in a place of business because of your race or ethnicity. If you are friends with someone who is LGBTQIA. If you are a man and you have been often complimented on your sense of style. Now, what do all of those questions and comments have in common? These questions and comments were taken from two icebreaker activities, one having to do with privilege and one having to do with hate crimes. Yes, some of the things that I shared with you are real life examples of hate crimes that were perpetrated against the LGBTQIA+ community. So when combining these two activities, we begin to see the intersectionality of one's identity. Let's take that a step further. Let's start to think about being Black and gay in America. With that combination, we can begin to appreciate the additional struggles of our Black LGBTQIA community have to navigate as opposed to their white straight counterparts. Now that that stage has been set, I want to first start by telling you that I'm coming to you from a place of allyship. I'm an African-American heterosexual female, but I also consider myself an ally to the LGBTQIA community. I don't have personal anecdotes to share, nor would I dare to say that I understand what it's like to be Black and gay. But what I can tell you is that my allyship has allowed me to dig in, to do the research, to hear the stories of others, and to enhance my own understanding and awareness. So I asked myself, how in the world do I begin to prepare to talk about something that I am not? But the answer for me was clear. You see, I love to learn. And so I got myself educated. I took it upon myself to research and do some more, to write and revise more in order for me to be able to come to you today and speak from a place of understanding. As the Director of Equity and Inclusion, I tend to look at things through a DEI perspective. And I did the same with today's theme of intersecting identities. And so my focus is not just on LGBTQIA, but also on how race plays into that. I began to think about the challenges of being Black and gay or lesbian in America. We can all acknowledge the struggles with being Black, but let's kick it up a notch and consider what it is now to be Black and LGBTQIA. This intersectionality is where race and sexual orientation intersect. So before I truly jump into all of that, let's go back to Daniel and Emily for a minute. What we see here is that Daniel and Emily are explaining the challenges of being minority, but Daniel is able to explain to Emily the additional burdens he faces by being gay. Emily, as a white lesbian and ally, is able to empathize with Daniel, but she recognizes that she can only understand so much as an ally. Daniel and Emily go on to talk about the importance of having these difficult conversations in order to make the changes. Exactly what we're doing today. Yes, this is a short little animated video, but it's still heartbreaking to hear Daniel talk about his experience with not being accepted in either the Black or gay communities. In both cases, he's meant to feel ostracized and inferior. Animated or not, Daniel's experience resonates with many of us. So here comes the research part that I did. Studies have shown that gay men struggle with acceptance in the Black community. Part of this refers back to religion, which in the past has been a source of homonegativity. The roots of the emasculation of Black men go all the way back to the days of slavery. David, would you please show the first slide? Okay, it's coming. David, can you move on to the first image, please? Wonderful. So, buck breaking was a term referring to when white slave owners raped male slaves publicly in order to show dominance over them, inflict punishment, and to emasculate them. Afterwards, the slave owners would cut or rip a hole in the pants of their victims. This was the sign of being broken. Slave owners knew that this would make these slaves feel less of a man among the other slaves and therefore help keep them down. Please note that the victims of this were the most strong, masculine, and virile of the enslaved. This practice does not speak to the sexuality of these Black men. It speaks to the need to dominate and control. And as a byproduct, taboo and stigma within the Black community began to grow. For more on this, I recommend the documentary Buck Breaking by Tariq Nasheed. So due to the stigma placed on the Black community all of these hundreds of years ago, Black gay men are less likely to seek education around their sexual health. And they are also at a higher risk of exposure to HIV. You see, sex within this population is not openly discussed, and so it's no wonder why these risks increase with Black gay men. In a 2019 article for Pose magazine, Benjamin Ryan wrote, "The low rate of use of pre-exposure prophylaxis among African-American men who have sex with men may be driven in part by stigma related to intersectional identities, including being both Black and gay." So if being Black and gay wasn't enough of a challenge already, imagine now being Black, gay, and HIV positive. You are now in an even more marginalized subset of the community. A 2016 study from the Journal of AIDS and Behavior showed Black gay men disproportionately experience homonegativity as compared to their white counterparts. As a result, the rates of depression and social isolation in the Black men is much higher than in the other groups within LGBTQIA. So we know that resources exist for this population, but what we fail to realize is that these resources don't necessarily lead to acceptance within one's own family or the African community at large. David, can you please advance to the next slide? This is Darius Pryor. In an article, Black and Gay in America, How a Subset of Men Struggle for Acceptance, dated June 26, 2020, Darius Pryor, who is the community health navigator for the LGBTQ Life Center in Norfolk, said, "That's a part of being a subset of the LGBTQ community. So for a gay white male looking at me, I'm still inferior. But I would get the same energy in my community from straight Black males because he only sees me as gay." Didn't Daniel just say this to us in the video? So Pryor goes on to say that part of the issue is that he is being seen through a lens of a power hierarchy. Because of his skin color and sexual orientation, he lacks power in both minority communities, which makes it that much harder for him to feel accepted. Given all of that, I am happy to say that these conversations are changing. We are seeing greater acceptance in Black churches and within the community, in part by the rise of Black Lives Matter. Going back to what Daniel said in the video, civil rights and gay rights have always piggybacked off of one another. Black Lives Matter is addressing issues of discrimination, which leads to awareness of the issues related to LGBTQIA. So I'm going to switch it up a little bit and begin to talk a little bit about the Black lesbian in America. David, if you can please show the next slide. Oh, here we go. The media has created an image for us of the Black lesbian. If you think back to the movie Set It Off, Queen Latifah played Cleo. Here she is. She was the first in the movie to suggest violent robberies to solve their problems. The media has a habit of showcasing Black lesbians as criminal. In a 2016 article for Code Switch, Nicole Pasulka stated, "Stereotypes and myths about Black lesbianism have been kicking around for at least a century, and Black people have been hypersexualized and stereotyped as violent in the media and popular culture for far longer." David, the next slide, please. Thank you. In 2006, 4 Black lesbian women got into a fight with a man. They were arrested and charged with felony gang assault and attempted murder. According to the woman, the man engaged in catcalling and was using threatening words and behaviors. After repeated attempts to ignore and discourage the man, the woman claimed that they then had to act in self-defense. The media called them the killer lesbians. Despite evidence of their victimization, they were convicted and sentenced to 3 to 11 years in prison. The idea of the violent Black lesbian has roots that go way back, much further than this 2006 incident. I actually found a case from 1926 in which a stabbing occurred between two women in a relationship. A quote from the Times said, "An act of violence between women in romantic relationships wasn't seen as an unfortunate incident or an exceptional event. It was the result of the woman's abnormal lives and desires." Historian Estelle Friedman wrote that the stereotype became even more entrenched when women's prisons became synonymous with lesbianism. According to the Equity Project, a coalition of experts on LGBTQ youth and juvenile justice, reported that nearly half, 40% of girls in the juvenile justice system identify as lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. 86% of these girls are girls of color. You see, Black queer girls who appear more masculine are often treated more aggressively, and definitely so by the police. So during my research, I came across the Georgia Voice, which is a media source for the LGBTQIA community. In an article from 2018, it noted, in general, the experience of African-American lesbians tends to be marginalized in the LGBTQ community. Black lesbians deal with unique challenges in the community. Stacey Hartwell went on to say, society still views lesbians as taboo. Our own race still can't seem to grasp that this isn't something that just white people do. So now that I've shared a little bit about the challenges of being Black and gay, I have to note that these populations continue to have more challenges related to their Blackness than their orientation. Sexual orientation is not something that can be seen, but the color of one's skin is undeniable. It would be a disservice to insinuate that the challenges faced by Black folks are the same as those faced by the LGBTQ community. But what I recognize is that when these two things are combined, the challenges increase tremendously. When I began to research this topic, I simply Googled being Black and gay. I was overwhelmed by the amount of articles that showed up. This alone was an indication to me of how prevalent these issues are. Today, I shared a little bit about the historical stigma of being Black and gay, but I also shared about the lack of acceptance, being further marginalized, and the assumption of criminality. I hope that what I've shared has further validated the intersectionality of race and sexual orientation. The injustice, inequity, and hate shown in the various articles that I read triggered in me a desire to stand up in my allyship. As a Black woman, I've been very aware of the injustices that have been placed upon the Black community. And I have always been afraid for our Black sons. But now, with this newfound education, that fear has grown to include our sons and daughters who are part of the LGBTQIA community. Here at Penny Lane, we are working diligently to bring racial and social justice to the forefront. We are actively involved in pushing an agenda of inclusivity. We have action steps in place to educate our staff and the community in hopes that one day there will be equity for all. Until that day, I will do what I can to promote and bring awareness to the issues being addressed today. Like Daniel and Emily said, we must have these conversations. From there will be action. David, I have one more slide that I'd like you to show. So instead of leaving you with images of criminality and violence, I prefer to leave you with images that celebrate the beauty of Black pride. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Judy. Wow, that really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I myself have not, visibly known, or, and I really feel that hearing some of these stories and the way you contextualized it, really hits home for a lot of these folks that are listening to this here. So thank you very much for sharing that. The historical stigma that goes into that, talking about these different marginalized communities here and how they all, the intersectionality of it all. It's so important. And it's so important that, we as ourselves, as, in the work that we do within our families, within our loved ones, within the communities that we live in, and we got to ask these questions. We got to talk about these things and bring them up into our everyday conversations there, so they're not so difficult. They're not so foreign. And so we all are educated and we all know, and the one thing that I took away from what you just said was, a lot about your allyship. It made you real. You said you knew what it was like to be Black. It's like to live in your path here, but now you're seeing it for our trans, our gay, or lesbian, or the population there that is so affected by this here. And what I put to everybody here is I say, when Judy talks about allyship is, what can you do? We are a community here. There's people from all over California, all over the world that are watching this presentation right now. And, I just put it on yourself is, put that into your own shoes. What can you do to make a difference? What can you do in your own work, in your own daily life? How can you be a better ally? How can you help out even though maybe you're in the LGBT community, how you can help that out? So, and if you have any other questions that you want to take that you got from this here, that you want to ask Judy, we're going to be coming back to a Q&A after we go through all the different presenters. So one more time, a big round of applause for Judy Grant. Thank you very much, Judy. All right. So next up, we have Summer Gomez, another presenter from Penny Lane Centers. As I said before, Summer runs our Embracing Identities program, which maybe she can give a little bit more information about what that program is at Penny Lane Centers. But Summer's been with Penny Lane for quite a few years. She's been a presenter many times at the EDGY conference, and she's going to be presenting again in the 2022 EDGY conference. Summer, welcome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so Embracing Identities is a program that works to increase support for LGBTQ+ youth ages 16 to 25. We have a range of services, including support groups. We have a program for the parents and caregivers of LGBTQ+ youth to give them education and support. And we do a lot of trainings to the community. So that's Embracing Identities. Like Cameron said, my name is Summer Davidson Gomez. My wife is Latinx. Although she was raised in Burbank, she's the granddaughter of Mexican immigrants. She has fond memories of being served warm corn tortillas while visiting her grandparents' house as a child. When she and I met and decided to have a child, it was very important to us that our child be raised Latinx as well. Now, this may be news to you, but having children does not just happen the old-fashioned way when two women get married. We knew that I was going to carry our child, and we got the opportunity to choose the donor. We wanted the donor to be as much like my wife as possible. We searched and finally found the ideal donor. He was athletic, like my wife. He was outgoing, like my wife. And he was Mexican, also like my wife. And it worked. Our son is so similar to my wife that you would never know that they are not biologically related. On the other hand, when my son and I are out together, I get asked if he's adopted. My wife and my son both have intersecting identities. When we hang out with our Latinx friends, my son is the one with two moms. When we hang out with our Burbank friends, my son is the beautiful brown boy. Because of these intersecting identities, the concept of allyship towards the queer communities of color has been on my mind. How do we support children with intersecting identities so that they grow up with empathy toward others and they themselves can be allies to others, regardless of the identities with which they identify? If the host can enable screen sharing, I can share my screen for my slides. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so What does it mean to be an ally? Merriam-Webster defines the word ally as one that is associated with another as a helper, a person or group that provides assistance and support in an ongoing effort, activity, or struggle. More than being a friend and supporter, it means using one's privilege to stand up for marginalized people's rights. Those who identify as white, heterosexual, and cisgender can be allies, as can people within the communities of color and queer communities who wish to support each other's unique needs. And while there is no cookie-cutter way of being an ally, doing so requires education, advocacy, action, and a desire to learn from your mistakes. Next slide. First, to move into a deeper place of empathy and understanding, get educated on the diverse lived experiences of queer communities of color and the discrimination they faced. In many cisgender white communities, there's a lack of knowledge about racism and discrimination. But do not turn to your queer colleagues and friends to explain these concepts to you. It is not their job. Rather, do your own research to learn the history of the movement you want to ally with. Learn what has been done before, what has worked, and what still needs to change moving forward. Be sure to shift some of the emotional burden of your education off of the people in your life who have another identity that you're privileged in relation to. It's okay to ask questions, but gut check yourself to ensure they're not offensive or cumbersome. Next slide. It's important that your next step as an ally is to listen to and believe queer folks of color when they tell you what they've experienced. Trying to explain away racism, homophobia, or transphobia is harmful and makes you complicit in upholding an unjust system. Listen even when it is difficult to hear. No matter how well-intentioned you thought you were, understand and accept when you have made a mistake. Next slide. Next, recognize your privilege. Privilege is a difficult thing to own and unpack, but it's a crucial step. It is important to acknowledge how your background and identities have contributed to harm and injustices. Coming to terms with that can be uncomfortable, but a worthwhile reflective process. An example of privilege? Not facing discrimination for your gender at work. 1 in 4 transgender people have lost a job due to bias, according to the National Center for Transgender Equality, and more than 3/4 have experienced some form of workplace discrimination. The reality is that society is set up to benefit some people more than others. When you benefit from a certain structure or environment, you have a privilege. White people, cisgender people, and straight people are inherently advantaged in certain ways by how society is structured, despite their own efforts, income, or background. Acknowledging your privilege does not mean that you have not worked for what you have or experienced hardship. It simply means that you have not been discriminated against due to certain aspects of your identity. Next slide. Inclusive language acknowledges diversity, conveys respect to all people, is sensitive to differences, and promotes equal opportunities. The use of inclusive language acknowledges that marginalized communities have ownership over the terminology that they use to refer to themselves. Learn the most up-to-date inclusive terminology and adopt it in your communication. Understand the pronouns people would like to be described with. When in doubt, ask sincerely. Learn how to use they pronouns correctly. Strive to move away from gendered terms like guys and ladies to refer to groups of people, and instead use gender-neutral language. If you find yourself needing to describe an individual's race or ethnicity, and you know that they describe themselves as Black, Latinx, or brown, to name but a few, always use those terms that they describe themselves as. Next slide. Speak up. As a person of privilege, you have access to social circles that queer folks of color do not. People may say things around you that they would not necessarily say if there was obviously a member of a queer community of color around. Perhaps you have heard racist or derogatory language used by family members or friends. Silence isn't a neutral position to take as an ally. Saying nothing can be perceived as a tacit acceptance of discrimination. Use your platform to educate others. If you bear witness to someone making a homophobic, transphobic, or racist statement or joke, whether or not the discriminated person or group is present, say something corrective. Next slide. Learn from your mistakes. You are going to make mistakes while getting better acquainted with queer communities of color, and that's okay. Humans make mistakes even when we have the best intentions. Being an ally is an ongoing process, and you are bound to say or do the wrong thing at certain points. It's about how you deal with those mistakes and move forward. Let people know from the start that you're open to guidance and feedback. The more you open up, the easier it will be to learn and communicate effectively. If you misgender someone or make an unintentionally ignorant remark, be proactive about fixing it. Recognize you made a mistake, apologize, and pledge that you will be more intentional with how you operate. Avoid making a scene out of apologizing or getting defensive. Give yourself a minute and acknowledge the possibility that they might be right. And try not to indulge in negative feelings. Making mistakes doesn't make you a terrible person. It just means you've got some learning to do. Next slide. And finally, make your actions match your words. Show up for queer people of color and other marginalized communities in ways that matter. Take responsibility for your actions, educate your peers, attend protests and marches, sign petitions, and donate if you can. Promote diversity in the workplace and volunteer your time. One example of volunteering is helping out at Penny Lane's in-person EDGY conference. Rescheduled for next May, volunteering at the EDGY conference is a great way to help to amplify the voices of queer communities of color. Allyship is not a single step. It is an ongoing journey. It takes work, self-reflection, and making that conscious decision over and over to step up until it becomes embedded in how we behave. Thank you so much.
Let's give it up for Summer there. Thank you so much, Summer. Now, as everyone can see there, you know, I always like to stress some of the takeaways that I personally get here, but, you know, like what we also want to hear is we want to hear from all of you. So write down some of those questions you might have for Summer, and we can address them later on there. But, you know, one of the things that I always like to stress about what Summer talked about is, you know, making mistakes. You know, a lot of us come into environments with, you know, and I'm just talking mostly about like our trans youth that we work with, or our trans clients, or our trans friends. And what that is sometimes people, they're aware of it and they want to say the right thing, and they want to be respectful, and they want to be respectful to the right pronouns and all that. But a lot of times people are afraid to misstep and say something wrong. And I just want to really stress how important it is that, you know, if you misgender somebody, or you make a mistake when you're talking with them there, that you didn't respect their gender identity or their gender expression, or you know, their sexual orientation. But what you can always learn is if you have that conversation and you're honest about it, you can always learn so much from that. I always take them as learning experiences. That I say, you know, like when I make a mistake, I'm like, hey, look, I'm wrong. I'm not. This is something new to me, and I'm learning this. And you have that conversation, and a lot of times that the other person is going to realize that you care about them, and then they matter and they're seen. And so, you know, I always say, like, you know, with allyship or with anything, you know, just be honest about your mistakes, you know, and don't try to, you know, push them underneath the carpet and say like, oh, what didn't happen? I hope they didn't hear me make a mistake there, because that's showing more disrespect than anything. So, you know, thank you so much, Summer. Like I said, if you have any questions, please come back to Summer there. Before we go in and I introduce you to Mario, I just wanted to, I know that I just want to just send a big thank you to David Neuendorf. David is someone who's behind the scenes here, sort of, running all the different PowerPoints and the slides and making sure everyone's sort of, visible there. Big round of applause to David. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to say thank you to him. Because a lot of times we're saying, David, can you do next slide? And people are like, who's David? So next up is Mario Johnson. One thing we like to talk about at Penny Lane Centers and then the work that we all do is the collaboration. And, Penny Lane Centers works so closely with the Department of Children and Family Services in Los Angeles County. And our connections we have with that organization, with all the organizations we work with, is so invaluable to progressing the LGBT community forward and making the youth that we all serve, safer and thriving in their own personal self. And recently, I got to meet Daria and Mario with a group of us in a meeting, and we were just talking, and we're like, Mario, your story is amazing. We want you to come present with us here. Would you be interested? And of course, Mario jumped up to the offer and said, I would love to be a part of this here. So I'd like to introduce everyone, Mario Johnson. Mario Johnson, as I said, comes from the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services. He is a division chief there for the Office of Equity. Mario, welcome.
Thank you, Cameron. It's such an honor and a pleasure to be here today to address this group and really talk about this topic and talk about my experiences as a Black gay man. But before I get into that, I have to say that this is my first time seeing you without a hat. And all the times that we've talked and we communicated, so the first time seeing you without a hat, you look quite handsome. With their hair. So I wanted to point that out. But
thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here and talk about being Black and being gay and what that journey has been like for me in my life. And so a lot of the things from Judy's presentation and a lot of stuff that Summer said has really been kind of triggering, to be quite honest. I'm hoping that I can hold it together as I go through this conversation, but I'm going to attempt to break my journey of being Black and being gay into chunks and try to really outline the intersectionalities that I've identified that I've had and things I've had to carry through my life and understanding how to balance being who I am against who the world expects me to be. And I'm going to give some dates. So I'm going to say from 1985 to about 1998. That's a large chunk of time, and I'm going to sum that up. But in 1985, I was 5 years old. And if you ask me today, I'm still 35. But I was 5 years old in 1985. And I remember as a little boy, my mother telling me not to allow my uncle to touch me. Now, at this time, I had no idea, no concept of what being gay was, what being lesbian was, or any of these things. And as I began to listen and pay more close attention to some of the conflict and confusion happening around me, it seems as if my mother and her older brother had a very serious issue with her younger brother, which is my Uncle James, being gay. And I witnessed and experienced them disparaging him with words. I witnessed and experienced them not including him or being inclusive of him and his partner in family events and family gatherings. And I always witnessed and was party to conversations that really had nothing positive to say about being gay or lesbian. One of the pivotal moments for me was maybe a couple of years after that, because of due to all the family rejection. I do believe at this point that my uncle found out he was HIV positive. He attempted to commit suicide. And I remember going to the hospital with my mother and my family being there. And it clicked for me in this moment when my mother said to him that, and I can't repeat exactly what she said because I'm going to be respectful of the platform, was that he was going to wake up and still be a blank. And At that moment, I knew that being gay was something I could not be. Being gay was something that I could never identify with. Now, in the midst of all of this happening for me and these things happening around me, I too myself as a young child, I'm kind of battling feelings because at this point, I knew early on I was attracted to men. I was attracted to boys. There was a classmate of mine, Russell, never will forget his name. I had a deep affinity for Russell. Russell and I was best friends, but I felt some for Russell that I didn't feel for my other friends in the class. I couldn't identify what it was. But with the stuff happening at home, quickly learning what being gay meant, I started to align those things and immediately thought that this is bad, this is not good. If I go further into this story and into this journey around being gay and understanding sexuality, if you all can hear it in my voice, I'm from the South. I'm from the state of Mississippi and born and raised in the Baptist church. So now, as I'm getting older and I'm listening more to sermons and things being said in church, I'm hearing from the pulpit, from the pastor, from the shepherd, the leader who is supposed to be spiritually guiding me, that being gay is wrong, that God didn't make Adam and Steve, he made Adam and Eve. And I cannot tell you, if I had $1 for the number of times I heard that growing up, I wouldn't have to work today. And so then you start to layer in this next layer of, I'm someone's son. I'm starting to identify with being gay because of feelings that I have for certain friends. And they're more than feelings of being friends. They're more of loving feelings. But I hear this disparaging conversation at home. Now I'm hearing this disparaging conversation at church, and even being told in the church that in order to serve and to be an active participant in things that I like to do, sing, be an usher, do all these and be involved in these activities of the church, that you couldn't be or you could not identify as being homosexual. To further deepen that, as I continue to hide who I am, I continue to advance in church and I continue to grow. And so now I'm serving in leadership. And so many parts of me were kept hidden for so long as a teenager, and it created a lot of inner conflict. And I can sit here today and say that it pushed me into behaviors that I'm not proud of, but in behaviors that I felt I had to engage in to prove that I was a man and I was worthy of being a man and worthy of serving. And during this time, no one knew the level of sadness and hurt and just trauma that I felt around all the things I experienced around my uncle being gay, all the things that I experienced in the Baptist church around being gay. And let me add this to it, even in the Baptist church and being gay and being a youth leader, being in the choir, singing, also balancing men in the church approaching you and looking for a relationship with you as a child, grown men, looking for a relationship with you as a child, but then listening to them disparage homosexuality from the pulpit. It was absolute turmoil for so many years. Finally, after graduating high school, going to college, I had more autonomy over what I participated in church and what I chose to do. And I chose to totally walk away from everything just to have some sense of peace and try to figure out who I was, where I fit, and where I belonged in the world. Because on top of being a son, being someone's friend, being a brother, being a part of the church, a lot of things I took on as an identity was to prove that I was the Black man that I was supposed to be. Early on, you're taught that you're not supposed to cry because you're a boy, which is absolutely false. Early on, we're taught as Black men that you're not supposed to have emotions. You're not supposed to show emotions because you're the man. early on, we're taught all these things that are totally against who we are just as humans and how we show up in the world. I was taught that I couldn't wear my clothes to fit too tight. So guess what? I wore all these oversized, baggy clothes trying to prove to someone else that I was masculine and that I was a man. So I had to carry this intersection of what others thought masculinity was and not really being true to who I was as a person. In college, I definitely took a step out to be more expressive about who I was, in a way that was comfortable for me in the South because I'm still in the South. So I took a step out to be more expressive about who I was, shedding some things and some biases that had been placed upon me in my teenage years. In that, I started to really surround myself with friends who also identified as gay, but we were all afraid to come out. We were afraid to come out. We were afraid to be forward facing with that because of what we were going to, or the backlash we were going to experience from our parents, from people in the faith-based community, from our peers, from teachers, from all these, from just various places. And so I found comfort in the friendship and being able to find or have a place where I could talk about how I felt and I could talk about my sexuality more freely and more comfortably without feeling shame or blame. But we all shared the common theme of this could never go anywhere. This has to stay within this group. It has to stay with us because if anybody found this out about us, it would be total turmoil. Even during that time, one of the things that stands out for me as I think about my journey that people tried to throw around was HIV and AIDS. Only gay people contract HIV and AIDS. And if you have sex with someone of the same gender, you automatically contract HIV and AIDS. Now, this was on the heels of all the research being done and all the things being put out. But imagine being 18, having limited knowledge, and these are the things people are telling you and putting in place and upon you as a teenager, and you and all your friends are wondering, well, isn't protected sex? And you know, you just go through these things. So when you talk about the high rate of HIV among Black men, it quickly takes me back to that space of feeling like we had to do everything in secret, which puts you in situations where you engage in unhealthy sexual activities. And it almost puts you in a position where you're thinking, oh, you say because I engaged in sex with another man, I'm going to have HIV or I'm going to contract it. So then when you get over into the situation and you're toggling protected sex versus not, you're easily influenced and you're easily persuaded to do things that you probably wouldn't normally do, but you take those risks because you don't have the information. And you're put into this place where you're doing all these things in secret and not out in the open, where you can really gain the knowledge and the information you need so you can proceed and be healthy around how you choose to engage in sex and how you choose to do these things. Moving forward, still struggling with my sexuality in a way of not wanting to come out, I decided to get married. Because after I graduated from college, it was placed upon me that, well, this is the next thing you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get married and have children. So guess what I did? I got married and I had a kid. And so I'm going to bring you up. This is 2000 to maybe, I'll say 2002 president. I'm going to give another time, but that's another big chunk of time. I decided to get married. Married a beautiful young lady, full of life, very vibrant, and loved her then. I still love her very much today. And we had a beautiful son. His name is Cooper. He's 16, and he is part of my gray hair now. But a wonderful thing that came out of that marriage. But in that union with my ex-wife, I began to become very depressed. I loved my wife. I wanted to take care of my wife. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted her to be healthy. I wanted my son to be happy. I wanted him to be healthy. But I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. And I can't even think of a word to describe how miserable I was. And in that misery, my ex-wife began to question, why are you not happy? And still being afraid and not knowing how to explain to her, to articulate to her, I'm not happy because this is not who I am. And being able to articulate to her in a way that I'm not happy because this is not who I am and it has nothing to do with you. I love you, but the way we are in relationship is not how I want to be in relationship with you. I turned to drinking. In order to cope, I felt like I had to be numb, not to feel some of the things that I felt. And I would go to happy hour every day after work, and I would drink until I couldn't feel anymore. I would drink until my lips were numb. When my lips were numb, I knew I was at a place where I could cope, I can go to sleep. Honest to God, true. And I engaged in that unhealthy habit for probably a little bit over a year. The pivotal moment for me in that was I came home one night and I was so drunk I couldn't see. My vision was, I couldn't see. And my son at the time, who may have been maybe about 3 or 4 years old, walked up to me and he was crying. He thought I was sick. He was bawling, he was crying. I was like, Daddy, are you okay? Mama, Daddy's sick. Daddy doesn't feel well. And I absolutely, if I could have crawled within myself and died that evening, I would have, because me numbing my pain and being in the state that I was in had my son upset and thinking that something was seriously wrong with me. And it was only because I had been drinking, trying to numb the pain that I had and trying to figure out how to cope with how I felt, because everybody around me seemed to be so happy. And I had to the commercials that they have for the psychotropic drugs where they put the happy face up in front. I had the happy face with the popsicle stick in front of my face as if I was happy, and never felt that happiness deep on the inside. But that night when my son cried and was very concerned about whether I was sick or not, and he never left my side. He slept with me that night. He didn't want to leave me because he thought something was seriously wrong with me that night. I decided to do something different. I had a conversation with my ex-wife, and I didn't tell her the exact reason at that point in time, but I told her, this is not working for me. And I'm not happy. And I think we need to go to counseling and just kind of talk through it. And I need guidance on how to guide me and you through getting a divorce, because this situation and how we are in this relationship, I can no longer do it. And so I took that step, I took that leap, eventually disclosing my sexuality to my ex-wife. And we divorced, and it was not easy. It was a hard road. I had to deal with the stereotypes. I had to deal with my ex-wife questioning my health. My ex-wife wanted me to go take several HIV tests because she felt I had cheated on her during our marriage and may have become HIV positive. I had to deal with stuff in my divorce decree around not having my son around other men, other males. So all the things that could have come with that storm, they came. And I had to absolutely weather those things by myself. Because if you go back and you remember my story started with my mother and how they treated her brother, my mother didn't know how to support me. My brother didn't know how to support me. My friends were on the fence on whether or not they were going to support me. And so you're just a man on an island by himself, figuring all these things out. On top of being in the midst of growing in my career in child welfare, always the picture that I think it was maybe summer show where you had the ball and chain on one ankle and you're having to jump the hoops. Always having to jump these additional hoops and all these things to continue to advance in my career, carrying the weight of embracing my sexuality and who I am, carrying the weight of being somebody's son, carrying the weight of not being somebody's father, and figuring out how to show up for this human being so he didn't have the same experiences that I've had, and that he grows up to know that I'm accepting and embracing of who he is and who he chooses to be. Carrying all these things while being Black. And so not only at this point in life do you have the stereotypes around your sexuality, now I'm balancing that with the stereotypes around being the Black man. So, and then that's sometimes layered on when people know that you identify as gay, as being, they characterize you as being weak, being lesser than. And so you're carrying all these things, you're managing all these things, and you're trying to balance all these things. One thing I would share with the group is that as I started to become more accepting of myself and embracing my sexuality, embracing my Blackness, and embracing my passion, being confused for being hostile or being aggressive, embracing that others are intimidated by me because I just may have an intelligent thought in the room and not want to sit there and be a silent partner. Embracing being able to stand up and be the voice, to be the advocate. I learned my absolute true strength that started way back when I was a little boy and witnessed the things that happened in my family around my uncle. I embraced the strength that I had to endure the religious situations that I had to endure, disparaging who I am on the inside as a person. And so I embrace that strength and I use that strength now to not only advocate for the children and families that I work with DCFS to serve, but to advocate for those who, whenever I see someone being disparaging of anyone, whether you're Black, whether you're LGBTQ plus, carrying their strength and using my voice to be the voice of reason and to advocate and to educate others on what this looks like. In summary, I want to say I think what's most disparaging for me as a Black person, and I heard this on a podcast not too long ago, is that being Black and gay is almost like a double, triple threat. You have all the people around the world coming for you who don't believe in homosexuality and being gay. So you have those daggers, but it hurts even more when you turn around and you see a face that looks like yours, someone with the same skin that you have, driving that dagger even deeper into your back because of your sexuality and your identity of being gay, when we're all supposed to be banding and standing together against the injustices and the things that happen in this world. And so if me sharing my story doesn't do anything else but give someone the power and the strength to have empathy, to understand from our frame of reference of what we have to do every day, that's enough. And I'm willing to continue to share my story. So at bare minimum, if we can't do anything else, if you can't do anything else, understand that empathy is key. You don't have to identify as being gay. You don't have to identify as being lesbian. You don't have to understand the whys around someone who wants to be transgender. That's not your business. But what you can do is you can be empathetic and you can understand from their frame of reference, and you can support them in being the best person that they can possibly be, because you can only be you. And a wise person once told me, be the best you that you can be. Don't try to be anyone else. And with that, thank you.
Wow. I just want to give it a moment here just to sit there and just let all this digest a little bit here. Mario, thank you for being just so honest and so just transparent with your journey. You know, change is difficult, and you can see that from generations of generations, you know, from within your own family, your own community, that change has not been taken, you know, the way that we all hope it would be. And I could probably sit here for an hour and try to unpack all these different conversations that you brought up in terms of just, you know, masculinity here, you know, being, you know, the stigma between HIV and AIDS, you know, the fear of coming out, the fear of not being loved by your own family, the fear of losing your own loved ones, your own children, and having that same cycle repeated on you after you come out to your wife. And just, there's so much there. Please, everyone, if you have any great questions or anything you want to continue the conversation with Mario, please write those down right now. We're going to address them after, you know, our next few presenters there. But just want to say that I'm just very moved, and I'm a little speechless right now, because I want to give you a big hug, you know, and say that, you know, and to say thank you for just being so honest and so just forthcoming about your story. It's amazing, and I feel that everyone here probably feels that same thing. So let's give it up to Mario. Thank you very much. All right, so next we're going to move up to just with time, I have to move things along. We're trying to end here by 3 o'clock. So I want to introduce to everyone Christopher Harriott. Christopher and I have been friends for some time now. He used to work at Penny Lane Centers, and then he decided to go on his own and start the Healing Chariot. Christopher is just full of life. Someone that, you know, I immediately became friends with when I met him, and I feel that his story is just so engaging. So, Christopher, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you for coming today, and welcome. Do we lose Christopher?
I think I was muted, right? Am I unmuted?
Okay.
I was just saying, thank you so much. I was so enmeshed in Mario's story, I forgot I was presenting. I forgot that I was part of this panel. God, Mario, thank you so much. It's just such an inspiration. You sharing your experience, your strength, and your hope. And there's so much beauty in knowing that there's shared experience there, and it binds us in this journey. And it's so wonderful to see that we can surpass this pain. So thank you so much. Before I begin, I'm going to take a page out of your book, Cameron, because I think I just need a breath. I need a breath. I think we all can just take a few moments to take a breath, just to replenish, just to remind our hearts and our bodies that we're in a safe space, and knowing that we're taking in this information that really isn't always easy to hear. So let's just check in with ourselves, and we can continue this incredible journey that we're on. Thank you so much, Cameron, for hosting this incredible space to give us voice, and just to give us affirmation that we matter. We matter in this space and outside of this space. Judy, thank you so much for giving us the historical context to help us understand how embedded these issues are in our history. And Summer, thank you for just reminding us the importance of allyship. And, you know, thank you for sharing what that is and how we can leave this space today and continue to try to be allies. Just a little bit about me. My name is Christopher Harriott, and I'm honored to be here to share with you today. as a person who also identifies with intersecting identities. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in private practice at the Healing Chariot. And I am also really proud to add that I am a former alum of Penny Lane Centers since the year of 2011. I've served in many different roles at Penny Lane, and I have to say that I've really always admired and cherished the leaders that I've been privileged to work with at Penny Lane, because I have always felt nurtured both professionally and personally, regardless of my race, regardless of my gender, regardless of my sexual orientation. And for that, I will always be truly grateful to Penny Lane. And I guess I have to say that I'm equally grateful that no matter how far away I stray from Penny Lane, they always find a way to pull me back in. And this is just one of them. So thank you for that as well. I'm going to start today by admitting to you that since the date of May 20th, 2020, I have honestly been living my life as a somewhat fractured human being. It was a Wednesday evening, and I was standing in the living room, and my partner was in the kitchen, and he was fixing us a meal. And we were sharing about our work days. Actually, I think we were complaining about our work days. And I just happened to turn my head just ever so slightly towards the television. And that's when I saw a Black man on the ground with a white cop pressing his knee into his neck. And as I'm watching this, I could feel my body going numb. And I was hearing all these people in the newscast, or the people around the guy, saying things like, dude, I don't think he can breathe. You don't have to do that. I think you just killed him. And I remember in a burst of anger and shock, I just screamed out, nobody fucking cares for us. Excuse my language, but I'm being real. And that was quickly followed by this uncontrollable burst of tears. And I'm continuing to listen to this program and listening to what's happening. And I quickly learned that all this stuff was happening in Minnesota. So for you to understand how the universe continues to screw with my mind, in that moment, my partner, the guy in the kitchen cooking a meal for us, is a white man born and raised in Minnesota. So as time continues to go on, I started to realize that my partner, who loves me, and I'm hoping he's still going to love me after I'm putting all his business out in the street today. Don't worry, folks, I got his permission to talk about this. It dawned on me that even though he loves me as a Black gay man, he did not know what it meant to be an ally to the Black community and communities of color. And he had very little experience about being an ally to the LGBTQ+ community. So you can imagine the rash of thoughts going through my mind in that moment, questioning myself as a Black man in a gay relationship with a white man, and all the historical context and experiences that I've had in the world, along with the clashing of Black culture, the clashing of white culture, the clashing of white gay culture. I think the only way that I can kind of describe this would be like a destruction going on in my head, and definitely a destruction going on in my heart. I think I remember feeling my body shaking for many, many days, and I couldn't really explain to my partner what was going on because I couldn't really make sense of all of this myself. And on top of all of this crap happening in my mind, I still had to show up in the world as a psychotherapist, seeing multiple clients a week who also needed a place to process the events of the world happening around them. So I really just wanted to disappear. I was so angry. And of course, the self-loathing feelings started to come up, and I didn't know what to do with all of these shattered feelings and these fractured thoughts. And all I kept doing was talking about it and talking about it until I felt something, and I was talking it with people that I felt safe enough to talk to. A few months ago, I was talking to my own therapist because the helpers need a helper. And she helped me realize something about what was probably happening to me. I think what was going on was I hadn't had the opportunity to find my own platform for self-advocacy so that my voice and my life and my experience wasn't being silenced. I needed a way to believe that everything that was happening around me and happening in the world around me was meaning something. It had to mean something. So again, having all of you here today, selflessly taking time out of your busy schedules to show your love and support, it really means a lot to me, because your being here and listening right now is literally helping me to continue my own healing. So thank you again for being here. David, can you show the power and the control wheel? Thank you. You know, as I was preparing for this talk today, I was actually kind of surprised to see how many pieces of this pie I was eating. With wealth, I definitely know what it's like to be marginalized as a poor person. Body size, I definitely know what it's like to be marginalized as an obese and a large person. Mental health, sometimes I think I fluctuate between mostly stable and robust, hopefully. But for today's topic, people, I'm going to just focus on the areas of me that will never change. I will always be a cisgender man. I will always be a dark-skinned Black cisgender man. And I will always be a dark-skinned Black cisgender gay man. Thank you, David. So what did that mean for me growing up, and what does it mean for me now? I'm gonna ask you, David, to put up this picture of little C. So that's me, little Chris, that everyone calls me at home. As you taken this image of me as a little boy who, of course, basically was brought into this world without much choice in the matter, think about how this little boy starts off as a totally clean vessel, and how little Chris starts to develop a sense of who he is mostly based on how others treat him, how others look at him, what others say about him, what others say to him. And then because of how the world has influenced little Chris and his sense of self, he starts to walk around with the world sort of apologizing for his existence, for taking up space in the world. I don't know if you can imagine or you have the experience of being made to feel so ashamed for existing that every interaction with another human being is met with this conditioned mindset that you have to apologize for breathing the same air as everyone else. Thank you, David. Of course, it's going to be really impossible for me to share over 45 years of the rest of my life in 20 minutes, but some of the most significant experience, I think, that I believe contributed to a lot of the struggle of intersectionality for me included, being just like you, Mario, being a gay Black man born into a very, very large Southern family full of Southern Baptist preachers, including my own mother. being a very sensitive gay man born and raised in one of the toughest neighborhoods in the Bronx, New York, being a Black sexually confused young man who was bused from the Bronx at age 12, where I was only used to being around Puerto Ricans and Blacks and Dominicans, to an all Jewish middle school for 3 years of my life, where it was my very first time ever being exposed to a predominantly white group of people, and my first time really experienced being othered. And then trying to earn my higher education degree at a school in upstate New York, where I was called every Black expletive you can imagine for 4 years on a weekly basis. You know, as painful as those experiences were, I somehow managed to push through, although there were many, many times that I really just wanted to say, screw it, I can't do this anymore, God, just stop the madness, stop the pain. But I got through. And then eventually I moved to California. This was back in 1991. And eventually I started a new sort of journey of self-discovery. And that's when I began affirming my life as a gay man. And it was all very scary, it was all very nerve-wracking, but all really exciting at the same time. And I actually really thought that finally, you know, maybe this is the community where I will be accepted and where I will feel welcomed. Now, I don't know how many of you out there, because I know there's a lot of people that are from all over the country on this call, but how many of you are familiar with West Hollywood, California? But that was my very first and only exposure to gay culture back in the late 90s. Now, I'll put a caveat on this because I haven't really immersed myself in the throes of West Hollywood as of late. So I don't know how much of that culture of the gay community has changed since then. But back in the 90s, when I started to explore myself and the culture of belongingness, I experienced West Hollywood with such extreme amazement, coupled with disappointment and disillusionment, because quickly I was experiencing masses and masses of gay white men in the community treating me as othered, or worse, ignored. It was just like Daniel in the video that Judy presented earlier. I remember walking down the streets of this supposedly sort of community of acceptance and saying to myself, where are the Black gay people? Like, why is nobody acknowledging me when all I'm trying to do is be nice? I'm just trying to be kind. I'm just trying to be friendly. And no one is like, wants to even come near me. And where the heck are all the lesbians? I was so confused. I was really, really confused by the lack of acceptance and the lack of representation. And ultimately, I started to feel loss again. And this feeling of loss, I guess, was really familiar because it was the same feeling I got from members of the Black community who shunned me for being gay. And now members of the gay community are shunning me for being Black. So I really didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to deal with this. And I think what happened was, after this revelation and all the formative years of my life thereafter, I was really partly living my life on autopilot. I was just trying to survive and trying not to give up, and really trying to find ways on a daily basis to just continue believing that there's got to be some good people out to be still possible for me. And so now we're here together. And what's happened since then is we've been thrown into a massive pandemic. You know, attacked by police and white supremacists. Black transgendered people continue to be killed, but you will never see their stories on the news repeatedly for anyone searching for their bodies years later. And then there's a rash of Asian hate crimes that start to overflow the community. And then a group of angry white people storm the Capitol because they don't want a Democratic president in the office. So I'm going through all these experiences and witnessing all this stuff, and yet I'm still here today. So as I end this, I guess the thing that I wanted to share is, what is the takeaway? What is the takeaway that I can share with you around this? Daniel, can you put up, David, I'm sorry, can you put up the fear slide? You know, I was having a conversation with someone a few months ago, and at the end of the phone call, she asked me, Christopher, I don't understand how you continue to be so chipper and bright and shiny and positive. And I had to really take a step back and think about that question, because it is kind of surprising that I can actually muster a smile for almost anyone while trying to survive this life with these intersecting identities that I have. And I think the only answer that makes sense to me is that I'm still here, which means I must still have some kind of value. I must still have a purpose. I must still be meant to survive. I must be still expanding somehow. And I've learned, just like it says here, that I don't have to fear my fear. I can use it as a way to get closer to love. And although there have been many, many experiences that have been really quite painful as a gay Black man in America, I do believe that my intersectionality has also developed my greatest strengths. Thank you, David. For those of you who are living with intersecting identities and experiencing marginality of any kind, there are just two major tools that I continue to use to help me thrive, and I'd like to share those with you as I close. One is find your tribe. Instead of wallowing over those who didn't honor my wholeness, I allowed myself, and that's a key word, allowed myself to be bathed in the respect and the kindness from those who built me up and honored my Blackness and honored my gayness, those who encouraged my talents and don't expect me to be anything or anybody other than Christopher Harriott. Number two, find and build your resilience. Small acts of love, you guys, such as being scared of this unpredictable world, but getting up out of the bed anyway. You know, standing tall in that place, even if you are the only person of color in that room, or the only LGBTQ plus person in that room, or whether you're the only person in that room without a degree. Whatever small victories you achieve, claim them. And when someone acknowledges you and compliments you on your achievements, claim it. These are just a couple of the things that I've done just to keep me going, and I hope they will help you too. And lastly, I just like to assure you that little Chris no longer walks around the world apologetically. The last slide that I have, what I try to do instead is I'm just trying to do this daily practice in the words of the civil rights activist and co-founder of Black Lives Matter movement, Alicia Garza, who said, the fight, it's not just about being able to keep breathing. The fight is actually to be able to walk down the street with your head held high and feel like I belong here, or I deserve to be here, or I just have a right to have a level of dignity. Thank you. Thank you so much for being part of my healing today, guys.
Wow. You really ended that in a very strong way. And I think that, you know, just thank you. Thank you so much, Christopher, for joining us. Thank you for your powerful words. And I just want you to know that, you know, you are loved by me and by many, and your transparency and honesty, it does not go unnoticed. And, you know, I would love to sit here and talk a little bit more. I just know that we have some time that we have here. That we said 3 o'clock. I just want to open up to everyone, let you know that we're going to stay a little bit longer. I know that some people have other, places to go and other meetings to attend. So if you can't, you can always email me or the team, and I can get the team the questions you have. It's my email address is cglasgow. I'll put it in the chat for everyone there. If you want to email me any questions that you want to have for the presenters, I can then send them over to them, and we can answer some of those via email. But if you have the time, we'd love to have you stay on after Cadence is done to answer some questions for our audience. We'd love to have that there. Just moving on here, I would love to say I saved the best for last, but I think everything's been so powerful today. Cadence is one of our former clients. Cadence came into our Commerce TAY Center, which is a transitional age youth homeless drop-in center. From there, Cadence has thrived. Cadence has, moved on to work in several different organizations and help out the LGBT community, the trans community, and just, homeless youth in general, and what I will, before we go into Cadence, I just really want to say that you can see that, from each of every person's presentation here, there's so much intersectionality and so many stories that you've heard that, Mario's story and Christopher's story and Judy's story, and they all overlap. And there's things which puts it on all of us is that, as the community that we are here together, is that we have a lot of work to do. And, you got to put yourselves in the shoes of some of these youth that we all work with that don't have the support group, don't have families. They start out with nothing, and you can see how strong it is people who do have support groups. So just think about that as I introduce you, Cadence, and listen to Cadence story, and, just know that we have a lot of work to do. Cadence, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Cameron. Thank you so much for me being part of this conversation. I'm so happy to be part of, the intersection, the identities conversation. And I want to say, hey, everyone, my name is Cadence King. I identify myself as a Black woman of trans excellence. I use Mel Monroe pronouns, and a lot of people ask me, what do that mean? And I want to say that when you think of Mel Monroe, just at the top of your head, just think of that noun that comes to the first thing that comes to your head. And I want to let you know that's my pronoun. So that's my pronoun. And before I get started, telling my story, I just want to say I'm very grateful and honored to be chosen to be, a presenter, of the 12th annual LGBTQIA conference. We did it, honey. We are here. This is the 12th. And hopefully we'll see, 12 more of these conferences. And I want to let all the viewers know, I know there's viewers, and I want to say this for you all, to not be afraid, and to share your story, because you will never know who you will empower. So just say your story, and it's very powerful, and you don't know who you inspire. So this is my story. I was born and raised in a small town in North Carolina. I knew who I was at a very young age in kindergarten. I was diagnosed with a gender confusion by a psychologist. Being assigned male at birth, my kindergarten teacher and the school therapist, they couldn't understand why, my gender expression, back in the 90s, that's what it was called, gender confusion, and they didn't understand why I was so feminine, so as I was living, in my truth at that early age, I would express myself, and with that expression, what led to my abuse. The abuse I was experiencing, it was verbal, it was mental, it was physical abuse. I was being abused almost on a daily basis, by my peers, my classmates, and the teacher will allow this. I was labeled the problem kid, I was labeled as a kid that, always act out, the problem kid. That's which made it okay for me being abused. And when I would come home from school, my older brother, he will abuse me. He will abuse me, physically, and also, sexually. And the reason why he would do this because he was abused, by our biological father, and he was being abused, and he saw me, as this smaller person that he can have this control of, to hurt, as well. And I was in and out of therapy, and my brother admitted that he did, did those things, and child, and while I was being abused, it affected my learning to, affected my learning to a very strong degree. It was very hard for me, throughout my elementary school days. And I was also diagnosed, with a learning disability, and I was also called, mentally disabled, and they said, the psychologist, I would say the child psychologist I was seeing, she said that I remember just like it was yesterday, that I was qualified to be sent to a mental institution. And, being young I knew at a young age, I have to stop expressing myself. I have to stop, I started to lie, lie to my therapist, just say everything was okay, that I didn't have these feelings anymore of, these gender feelings I was having, I would lie and say everything's okay. And I would stop expressing myself, and then I was still being abused. I came within a shell of myself, and at a very young age, I knew I couldn't tell my mom what I was feeling, because at night she would come, because my mom is very religious, in the South we are very religious, and she would come in my room, and she would come in with the oil, the anointing oil, and she would hold me down, in the bed, and that was even more traumatizing. I was feel like I was trauma on top of trauma. And I felt as though at being 5 years old, being that young age, I knew I couldn't come to my mom for anything. I felt like I was in a shell within myself. I felt like I was, suffocating. I felt like I was trapped. I became like a mute. I didn't tell anybody. I couldn't, verbalize, what this abuse was. I even had like a coping mechanism when I was being abused. I felt like it was almost like an out of body experience, and I would drift off into the clouds, and I would be drifting to a place that no one couldn't hurt me, even though I was still being abused. And in my adolescent years, I was still having these feelings, these feelings I was having, and I was like these same feelings I was having as a child. And I was in the library. It became my second home, and I was Googling a lot of things. I was like, I knew I wasn't what people said I was, in the past, I know I was a good person, a normal person. And I came across the term transgender, and I felt as though that was the term that fitted me to the perfect T, honey. I felt that was it. I was like, because I was, wanted to know what, the terminology. I wanted to know, where do I belong, And then after all the research I did, in my adolescent school days, when I graduated, high school, and, I was saying that I knew, it was doing my research, during the library, how to transition. I knew I couldn't stay, because there was no resources where I was from a small town, and there was no other people like me. And I just knew it was was time for me to go, and the only thing was holding me, back was, college, and I graduated college with my degree. And then I swallowed, my pride pill because I took a job at a fast food restaurant because where I'm from, small town, there's no metros, there's no transportations, there's no Uber, there's no anything like that. So you have to, you have to have your own car, to travel like an hour to another city, to get the job that you wanted. So my mom said she was not going to do that for me. And I even told her I would pay her money, for doing that, but she still said no, and I was like, there's no reason for me to stay. So I had saved enough money, and I saved enough money. I worked this fast food for 6 months, and I saved enough money for a Greyhound bus ticket, and and some leftover money so I could survive. And I remember because it was hard. It was when I booked this Greyhound bus ticket, there's no Greyhound bus stop where I'm from either. So I had to go to one of the bigger cities in my area, in the eastern North Carolina area, to get to the stop. And I remembered having my best friend, she actually helped me. She was my partner, my study partner in college. And she always told me that if you need anything, just let me know. Just let me know, and I would do it for you. So I had called her up one day and said, could you take me to this bus stop in this city? And she was like, I can do that for you. And I told her, you can just leave me here and I'll be fine. And she was saying that I was not going to leave you here because it was a one-way ticket, and the only time the bus was coming was late at night. It was like 9 or after 9. It was one-way ticket to California. So she waited for the bus, for me to go. And she was saying, you're really leaving, aren't you? I was like, yes, I have to leave. There's no resource for me. And another thing was, I never told my mom I was leaving. I left in the middle of the night because I knew firsthand how she will be. She would lose her mind, like, you're not leaving me. You're not leaving this house. She gonna have me at my ankles. I could envision that, So I never told her. I just left in the middle of the night. I had bought a military style backpack with all my things, all my life in it. And I went on the Greyhound. And ever since I got to LA, it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me. A lot of the things I found online was, old and outdated. The resources for trans individuals, you have to be in person. That's what I realized, services. But it was hard, for looking for service that tailored, transgender people. And I have been shunned away by many organizations for seeking help, and it was awful, and I was, when I got into the shelter game, I was hopping shelter to shelter. They really didn't, when I told them I was trans, and I was homeless, and I actually got robbed, the first time I was in my shelter, they didn't want to help me. They was disgusted. They were like, are you taking your hormones? They didn't care who I was. It was just that I was like a disgusting person to them. And they didn't want to help me. I'm like, why are you asking me these trans one-on-one questions? What does this have to do with my housing? What does this have to do with, providing me any kind of service? That's how it was. And it was awful. It was very awful. And I became, at my lowest point. I became, very depressed. I almost, convinced myself, I almost did, that our story, being LGBT, of color, that our lives. You know, we supposed to live and work the streets, you know, because that's why I saw, you know, in documentaries of, you know, like for example, Paris is Burning. I thought that's what the girls did. We have to work the streets to get the money, to get, you know, to have our means and then just live in the street. You know, I almost convinced myself, you know, that that was our lifestyle, that we were supposed to be homeless for the rest of our lives. And it was real awful. And I want to say, how do I feel as a trans person? How do I feel of what acceptance is? Will there be acceptance, you know, like truly, like full and acceptance, you know, for our community? And I want to say, I know this may sound awful, but I don't believe we will be truly accepted, you know. And I'm going to explain why. And I want to say, first, I want to say that I'm truly blessed, you know, for living in I just turned 30. So I'm just so happy that I get to live my 30 years on this earth, because being trans, you know, and Black, you know, woman of color, we are told that we're not supposed to live beyond 35. So I always, you know, before my transition in my early stages, I was afraid, you know, I was very afraid, you know, of dying, that I'm going to die one day. I'm going to die before my time. That's why I always was thinking, you know, before in my early transition. But I would like to, you know, I want to shed some light, you know, on that, you know, because a lot of people don't understand, you know, these depths, and I'm gonna shed some light, you know, on that. But first, I want to say, according to the Human Rights Campaign, the website, so far this year, we moved closer to, you know, a Trans Day of Remembrance. At least it may be more. This is just an estimate. You know, at least 45 people that identify as trans and non-binary people, and it actually surpassed the numbers of last year. You know, of the pandemic 2020, and this is ridiculous. You know, and most of us, you know, the ones that are dying, you know, are trans women, you know, of color. You know, and I'm a trans woman of color, and I want to shed some light on this, you know, of what our deaths are mostly, you know, coming from. They're coming from a lot of people. I feel like there need to be more research done on this, but to be honest, the trans women of color, we're dying because of, you know, DV, domestic, you know, violence, because these men, you know, that are attracted to us, it's like a love-hate. That's the line they walk with us, you know. They say that they love us, but in public, you know, it's a different story. You know, they always want to see us behind closed doors, or always in our four walls of our apartment. You know, that's what it's about. And most of them, you know, are Black men. And I want to say, being a Black woman, you know, we are told ever since living in my womanhood, I've always been told you are supposed to, you know, support and uplift, you know, the Black men, but at the same side of the coin, they are not doing that for us, you know, for trans Black women. They are killing us, you know, they are killing us at an alarming rate. And because of this, you know, of the domestic violence, they are killing us, you know, and at the same time, you're not supposed to tell on them. That's why I love a lot of these cases. They're cold cases, they're a lot of cold cases, and they don't our lives, you know, our Black trans lives, they don't really matter. wherever our deaths come up in the news, is always a headliner. They always did name us. And then sometimes the family of the trans person they are killed, they detransition them. You know, for example, if a Black trans woman, they detransition them, cut their parts off and dress them like they're a man, you know, and for their funeral. And it's very scary, you know, and alarming. And I also want to say that to this day, you know, you can still, because I want to say this, you know, a lot of people still think of my gender, you know, as trans people is a costume. And you can still, to this day, you can buy Caitlyn Jenner costume online, you know, and it's crazy and ridiculous. You know, you remember the backlash that came out, you know, when she said, "Call me Caitlyn." That whole outfit is still, you can still buy it. And another thing I will say is another reason why we're dying is because I feel like the way we see ourselves, you know, the way a trans person see ourselves, we want us to be seen the same way that you see us, you know. But a lot of the time, you know, people, they ask these trans one-on-one questions, they ask these trans bad questions. They like, what is like they ask how long you've been trans, or what was your name before? You know, I feel as though when they have these conversations with us, you're trying to look through us, look past the person, the physical, and trying to see, you know, trying to see who is that other person. Like my existence is crazy. It's like it doesn't matter. They want to know who was that dead person, that dead name. They want to know who was that person, you know, before you became Cadence or whoever, you know. And I feel as though that you know, right now we have this super straight, we have this super lesbian, this super gay. I feel like they're trying to cut us out. I feel like within our own community, our own LGBT community, they're trying to cut us out, you know, and it's crazy. Like, I don't want to, it's like our gender doesn't, and we are not the gender that we portray us, you know, what we identify as, you know, is crazy. They say, I want to date like a real woman. You know, I am a real woman, you know, or a real man. They would never, I feel as though it's going to be like I feel like it's already, I feel like it's already tolerated. I feel like it doesn't matter how many trainings we get with trans, you know, anything, they will never, I feel like I would never be seen as the woman that I identify myself as, because people just, it's just crazy, you know. And it's very sad. I feel like being trans, we are coming out all the time. It's like I have to tell this person this all the time, you know. If I want them to be my friend, you know, or I'm a date, I have to come out, you know. And it's always negative. I'm always, when I tell them my status, you know, tell them that my identity, my trans identity, I'm always reduced down, you know, to the lowest of the low. I'm seeing it. It doesn't matter, you know. It doesn't matter that I have a degree. It doesn't matter that I have all these certifications. I feel as though when I tell someone, you know, I'm trans, I'm look as though as a peasant. I'm look as though as a sex slave, a concubine, all those things. And and the people that treat us that way, they feel as though that I should accept that, you know, because I should accept that, you know, internally, you know, that you should be grateful that I'm even give you the time of day, you know, talking to you, you know. And I feel it's sad, you know, again, going back to, you know, the discrimination in our community. I even had a trans person, you know, himself, you know, I was, you know, asking about what happened to, you know, so-and-so, you know, this other person, they identify as a gay man. He was also a drag queen. He was, he held it against me when I called him by his you know, his name, not his drag name. And also he was angry with me why I didn't use the she pronoun with him, you know, but he's a gay man, you know, why are you giving him my pronoun? You know, I didn't understand that, you know, I would never understand, you know, and he was very angry, a trans person, you know, himself. And I feel as though, you know, I know it's sad, but I feel as though we're going down a sinking ship. You know, if we don't start now changing how things are, I feel like you have to be more than a better ally. You have to do more. And we have poor, there's no positive representation of us, you know, in the media, in this society that we live in this world. It was not made for us, you know, to live in, and we have to think smarter. You know, my viewers, I would say, that are trans, identify, non-binary, we have to think smarter because we are dying at an alarming rate, and things I want to say in the next 30 years, I want to be here. I want to say I'm still fucking here, you know, with my fist up, you know, but the rate as we're going, I'm not sure, you know, and I always hope for the best, you know, and I always will uplift and I will stand up for my community, but we have to do better.
Cadence, you finished it with the most powerful statement, is that we all have to do better, you know, and I wanted to say this to you from my heart, is that you're loved inside and out, and you're a beautiful woman that, you know, and thank you for being so honest and so just transparent in the way that, you know, the struggles and the challenges that you've gone through. Nobody deserves to go through that. Nobody deserves to go through the people looking at you and not seeing you for who you are. And unfortunately, that's the case with a lot, if not almost all, trans people, you know, and that happens to a lot of the LGBT community too. You know, me being part of the LGBT community myself, I know I need to do better. And I know that, you know, everyone here that's listening to your story knows that, you know, we have so much work to do. But sharing your story and letting us get a window into some of the things, the challenges you had, to become the powerful woman that you are, to become the beautiful person that you are inside and out. No one's listening to this and not realizing how strong of a person you are. You're a survivor. And nobody should have to live their life when they hit the age 30 and say, I'm not supposed to live 5 more years. That's a reality we all want to change. And your story is going to, if it helps just one person, but not helps everybody, it's making an impact. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
You're making me emotional. I'm sorry. It's just, and I just want everyone to know too, is just in the brief amount of time I've got to know you in this last year, you are out there in the community doing so much work. All of your free time you have, you're out there and you're trying to help out others in the community, whether they're trans, whether they're gay, whether they're homeless, or whatever their story is, you're out there to help out. And that's what I want everyone to realize, is that, you know, when we hear these stories, we need to be compelled to change, and we need to be compelled to listen to our own stories and ask the other people that their stories are. Every single person out there has a story and they have something to share. And I know in our world that's so busy and so moving so fast, but, you know, listen, because, you know, you don't know how, if you listen and you help that person, you're letting them know that their story is valued, that they are valid for who they are. But at the same time is you don't know how that story is going to change you and how you go and talk with everybody else that you interact with. So, wow. I also just want to be honest that, you know, I know that, you know, it's been 10 minutes over the 3 o'clock hour. I want to thank a lot of people that have been sending me some questions. Now, if those of you, I know that some people have had to drop off, but I would like to open this up to, you know, people if they want to ask a question. If you want to, you know, David, what's the best way for us to have these people? Are they going to be able to talk and ask the question, or do you want them to submit it through the chat and then I ask the particular panelist? Okay, so if you can put your questions in the chat. We're going to probably stay around till 3:30, unless we don't get many questions there, and we want to open this up to hear what you guys have to say. I know that a lot of the times, as we said, these stories create a lot of thought within ourselves, and we dive deep into our own stories, our own work, our own life. And it's important for us to hear about you, because I think some of our panelists can really, they have the tools to help you out with those answers. They've lived the life experiences. So I'm gonna take a look at the chat here, and I'm gonna open up the first question I see here. I'm not going to name the people's names. I don't think that's important for us to name the person, but one of the questions that came up was directed at Mario and Christopher. You both identify as growing up in the Baptist faith. They would like to know, do you still practice, and have you found that some parishes are accepting? I know that the question sort of fall through is they know that there are accepting Roman Catholic parishes in LA, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, but they basically want to know is faith a resource for you?
I can start. Absolutely, faith is still a resource for me. And part of my journey has been knowing that God loves me no matter what, and being more spiritual and connected to my spirituality, which connects me to Him. And now when I attend a faith-based organized church, the first thing that's top of mind for me is if it's affirming, because I'm not going to sit in a space where I'm being disparaged as a member of an organization. So a part of that journey for me was really moving beyond the limited things that I had been taught as a child and raised and been taught in the Baptist church, learning that I had to rely on self to read and interpret what the Bible said for me, and have my own spiritual connection, and find affirming spaces where I can be who I am and continue to be fed spiritually.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mario. It's all about, I had to find a very different relationship. I should say a personal relationship with God. And faith is a very big part of my life. I think it's the way that I move every single day. It's just about, I had to change a lot of the things I thought I understood, which isn't easy because, like I said, my mother's a Baptist minister for over 30 years. And we've had a lot of conversations around this. And what I just learned is that it has to be that God loves me, because when I came out, finally, my life got 100% better. So I just assumed that God just wanted me to be honest and wanted me to be real and be authentic. So yes, I still have faith in my life.
Thank you. Do any of our other panelists want to talk about that? Judy or Cadence, and I know that Summer had to leave, but does anyone want to? Okay. And another question I had that we have here was, it's a great question for everyone. And it's something I think that it's got a lot to chew on there. So as we try to unpack it there's no right answer there. But it came up as, how do we best support adolescent gay males that live their true identity, to live their true identity? So Mario's story of marrying a woman and alcoholism is not repeated. There's no right answer for that there, but I think what it is take a dive into it. Mario, we'll start with you if you don't mind.
Absolutely. I think it's around being accepting and start teaching acceptance to your children, not only acceptance of themselves, but acceptance of others, and starting to really unpack for them what various things mean. Not leading with hate, always leading with love and empathy and understanding around situations that are happening around them. It all starts with just teaching and what you start teaching your child or your children or young men when they're younger as they grow, those are the things that they start to embody. Those are the things that you start to see to flourish and to come through. And so moving away from toxic masculinity and language around that you have to play football, you can't be a dancer. You can't do this because it's not masculine enough. Moving away from those things or those stereotypes around being masculine and really pushing that toxic masculinity language is where we start to really see, or where we can see more kids, more young men starting to grow up and truly embrace who they are. The other side is that more of us have to become accepting and embracing of all, of LGBTQ persons, of persons who are of a different hue than we are. We have to become more embracing and accepting of all. Most people hide themselves because they feel that they don't want to be shamed, they don't want to be blamed, and they definitely don't want to be out of relationship with the networks and the people that are closest to them. And if there's something about you that you know is going to threaten that bond and that connection and that relationship, you're going to continue to hide that, and you're going to continue to do things in secret, which is definitely not going to be good for you and who you are long term. And so just embracing and understanding that you don't always have to understand a thing, but what you have to do is, again, be empathetic and understand from that person's frame of reference, embrace them and love them, and keep the relationship going and keep moving.
Does any other panelists want to address that too? I know that everyone has their own story. Cadence, do you want to share anything that's in addition to what Mario said?
Mm.
You don't feel pressure. Okay, well, like I said, I'm gonna move on to another question there. This is a great one, Cadence. Since you're on here, I'm just gonna it's addressed to you.
Okay.
What do you think DCFS can do starting today, where we can do better? Another additional question is, what would you like to see from DCFS social workers who have transgender and gender expansive youth in their caseload? The LGBTQ child welfare to homelessness pipeline is real.
It is very real, and because I work with youth, and I work with trans youth specifically, and I feel like it's an increase every month that youth are coming in. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, we need to do something. I don't know what these parents are doing. They are kicking their child out in the street, and they have nowhere to go. I had one client told me that my mom kicked me out, and then she was like crying, telling me to come back, and then she like kicked me out again. I was like, it's time for you to live for yourself. I said, I can help you with housing. But I feel like this cycle of kicking out the kid, is ridiculous. Like, we need to do something, maybe enforce some kind of law, or something. But I feel like it's crazy. I feel as though I'm trying to, in my mind, I want to get all of them housing, all of them jobs, And I said, I'm in my mind, I'm like, I'm this one person. I'm like, can I do it? There's so many of them, and it's so increasing, and it's overwhelming, And I know I've been in their shoes. I know what it's like, being kicked out of my own home.
Thank you for sharing that. I definitely think that, to add on to what you were saying there is that, I just push this to people, and I say to anyone here is that, obviously when we're talking about DCFS, these are, mostly youth that have already they're in the social welfare system here. But, the question I always tell people when I do some LGBTQ training is I just say, like, lead with love. If you love someone and you care about someone, you want to support them for who they are, not, what you think they should be, and a lot of times what it is, when I'm doing these trainings, I always tell people it's the adults that need to unlearn these things. It's people that think they get so set in their ways there, and I feel that if we were to look at things with an open book, which is harder to do than, than people come with so much to their plate, but listen and be open and hear what, people like yourself are saying there. Does any other panelists wanted to answer that as well, or add in anything to that? Mario, being from DCFS, do you have any thoughts there? Or Christopher or Judy?
Absolutely have a lot of thoughts there. And the LGBTQ work for DCFS sits under my purview. And there's so much that I know we need to do and so much we're trying to do. But one of the big things that we're doing now is just teaching social workers how to engage youth in the conversation, to ask about their SOGI. And then after engaging them in the conversation, to ask them about their SOGI, taking it a step further and making sure that we build and we craft case plans that's complementary to who they are. Taking it a step further and making sure that as we look for placements for homes for youth who identify as LGBTQ+, that those homes are either have LGBTQ+ resource parents or LGBTQ+ affirming resource parents. And so there's still more work to be done. But I'm happy to say that work is happening. We are increasing our focus around recruitment, the recruitment of parents who identify as LGBTQ+ and who are LGBTQ+ affirming. We are increasing our visibility in the offices using our LGBTQ+ engagement toolkit. And we have the help of what we call our LGBTQ+ champions to do that. And what's so wonderful and powerful about that is the champions don't directly work for the LGBTQ+ program, but they're willing to stand up and be a voice and be an advocate and walk other workers through how to engage youth in this important conversation. And so there's a lot of work happening, but please know that we recognize at DCFS that there is definitely more work to be done.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. Okay, we have time for just a few more questions here. I'm getting some information over here, but I just wanted to see if there's any other thoughts that Judy maybe has on to follow on there, or some of the questions I just, I talked about here is, if anyone has any questions about the historical aspects that Judy talked about. Unfortunately, Summer had to leave, but Mario talking about just, one of the biggest things is just how scary it is, sometimes to live in a world that, you got so many challenges just to be yourself, and the fear of that. And that's what's so important, I think, that we have to understand as, we work with LGBTQ youth and their families, is we know all about all this stuff, we can ask the right questions. And asking the right questions is so important. It's like, are you feeling safe at home? Do you feel like, your gender is accepted at home? Do you feel, that you can have these conversations with, your caregiver, or your parents, or those around you that are maybe in the social welfare system? Because I think when we all know, then we're able to better help. And then that's how I think, I go back to Cadence saying that she doesn't believe that, we're ever going to get to that place where people are just going to look at Cadence for who the beautiful woman she is. They're going to look at it in a different way. So I just want to see if anyone has any comments on some of the scary reality that's out there, or suggestions or anything from the panelists that you feel that would really be of value to, some of our audience here about, some takeaways they can have to work with the youth they serve.
Cameron, I'm going to just chime in here for just a moment. I can't speak to specifically DCFS since I'm not part of it, so I'm grateful that Mario is here to address that. But I can tell you what we at Penny Lane are doing to try to increase equity for our staff, for our community, and our clients. We are in the process of putting a training program together. And I know we've all heard, oh, you can go to a training, so on and so forth. but we are really taking action to put things in place through this training program. And it's quite intensive. It's a 10-week program that will really give our staff and eventually our community an opportunity to stop and really reflect on what is being discussed, so they have time to implement it. This is not a one and done conversation. This is an ongoing, everyday conversation, so it becomes part of the fabric of who we all are. Until we can do that just as easily as we can tie our shoes, we're going to continue to have struggles. So we will continue to have the conversation through these trainings, through support for our staff and our community and our clients, so everybody recognizes that we're not going to stop. You know, this isn't one event, this isn't one edgy and then there's not going to be another. There will be ongoing conversations. And I think as we continue to talk about it, you know, people will start to get it eventually. And hopefully that eventuality will come sooner rather than later, but we still know that we have work to do. But I think the people here are committed to doing the work.
I want to,
go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that in terms of how to support the youth. I was connecting back to my own journey and being a young Black child who knew that something was different about me in terms of my sexuality. And I always forget to give thanks to those adults that were in certain positions, teachers, guidance counselors, even some of my kind older neighbors. You know, the fact that they treated me with respect, even though I was a gay little boy, and all those other transitions that I made, that meant a lot to me. So if you are an adult and you are in a position where you get to interact with youth who may be struggling with their sexuality or their gender, just a kind word that alone is an action. It's an action of acceptance, because you don't know how that one interaction of kindness with that youth is going to stick with them and mean something and give them hope that maybe there are other people that will be accepting of me. Maybe today I won't have to kill myself because someone was kind to me. So those little acts, like I said, they mean something. And I would say if you're in a position to share a kind moment with a youth, do it. That's probably the most helpful thing that you can do in the position that you have.
Thank you. And you know, what I'm going to do is I just want to repeat that, you know, it's about 3:30 and we've gone about a half an hour over, and I'm sure that we could all sit here and discuss different topics, you know, regarding this conversation for hours there. So first and foremost, I just wanted to once again thank Judy Grant, Mario Johnson, Cadence, and I also want to thank Christopher for, you know, just, you know, and Summer as well. Unfortunately, Summer had to leave, but let's give it a big round of applause for all of our presenters and our panelists today. And I also just want to thank each and every one of you for coming out here and or joining our Zoom today to, you know, hopefully be motivated and have this conversation change you. You know, I personally believe, you know, in my years of running the EDGY conference, being a gay man myself, and just giving back to my community, it's the personal stories of people talking about what they've been through that me personally, I've grown the most from, but I feel that that's where as a community we grow the most as, and as just, you know, society, you know, that we have to listen to people, because, you know, we all think we know what everyone else is thinking. We all think we know, we have this intelligence that we know what's right, and we're adults and we can make the decisions for others. And that's not the case. You know, and as I mentioned before, is that, you know, I learned the most from the youth that are changing. You know, they change the trends, they change the styles, they change how we think and act. And so listen to our youth, you know, and be aware that, you know, in turn to, you know, sexual orientation, gender identity, that, you know, these things are, you know, gender identity starts between ages 2 and 6. And, you know, that's developed at a young age. And so when we start suppressing that at a young age, and then sexual orientation that starts around in your puberty, and if we suppress that so much, these youth, and I'm talking from experience, and you've heard it from everyone on the panel, we start thinking worse about ourselves, and we start that depression. We start all these different mechanisms to deal with this fear and the stigmas and what's going on in your head there. And so hopefully today you're leaving here with a call to action. And that call to action is that you're going to make a change in the way that you talk to people, the way that you listen to people, or whatever it is that's going to work for you, to give back to your community, give back to the LGBTQI community, to give back to all of society. And, you know, and if it just takes one person to do it, then we made our goal here today, if it changes one person. And so thank you very much. I'm going to put some slides on here that are going to talk a little bit about our EDGY conference that we have in next May. That's going to be in person at the Skirball Cultural Center in Los Angeles. We really hope you're all able to attend. We will be sending out the certificates of attendance to everyone via email there. It's just a form, you just got to fill out your name and information there. But again, you have my email address. If you want to ask any questions to the panelists that maybe, you know, a lot of times we leave somewhere and we have this question when we're driving in our car and it pops in your mind. They're like, oh, I wanted to ask that question. Well, you know, send me an email. You know, I'm putting all these questions into an email for the whole panelists here. And hopefully, you know, we can reach back to you and we can give you those answers, or put you in connection with someone that maybe can give you those tools and resources that will help. So just want to say thank you very much. And, you know, I want to turn this over to Judy, Mario, Christopher, and Cadence. If anybody have any last thoughts you want to say to anyone why these slides are presenting, please go ahead.
I just want to thank everybody for being here today. It's been a real honor. The conversation has been rich. And Cameron, you're right, there is a call to action. So I want to thank everybody for that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you, Judy.
I just want to say thank you to everyone, and thank you to you, Cameron, Judy, and everyone at Opinion Lane who so graciously accepted me being on this panel. And thank all of you who are on the call, and thank you all for the love in the chat. It's definitely appreciated.
Thank you, Mario.
I want to say thank you. I enjoyed this. This was an experience, you know. I hope I get to come back, you know, another EDGY conference. This was so wonderful. And I want to thank everyone. I'm so grateful, you know, be a speaker, you know, be a presenter, you know, of EDGY. And I wish, you know, all the best, you know, for Penny Lane. I'm so happy that they have this platform so we can have these conversations and hopefully that our stories, they will be heard and change will come.
And I echo the same sentiments, you guys. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for allowing me to participate. And Penny Lane, just keep doing the good work.
Well, I'm just going to end this and say thank you to everyone. We hope to see you in May of 2022. You can reach out to me and any of the panelists via email, and we'll get back to you. And thank you for joining. And, you know, have a wonderful rest of your week, and a happy Veterans Day to everyone.